Kevin Durso, 97.3 ESPN.com, covered both of the games at home, or yesterday's game at home. He'll be there on Wednesday night, and he joins us now on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. It appears via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. And, Kevin, that game yesterday, for a 5-1 finish, I mean, I thought really the Flyers dominated that first period but had nothing to show for it. I thought that Murray save was really the big difference.
It's certainly one of the pieces that is a big difference in that first period. The fact that the Flyers had so many scoring chances in the first period and couldn't find a way to capitalize was certainly a difference maker in the game. And I think you look at the first goal of the game being a marker for kind of where any game in the series is going to go. You know, Pittsburgh struck early in Game 1. That set the tone for their big first period against the Flyers in Game 1. Game 2, it's the Flyers who get that first goal and kind of get rewarded for weathering a bit of a storm in their own right in the first period in Pittsburgh in Game 2, score a power play goal. They carry that into the second period to get another quick goal. So the first goal has kind of been a big momentum changer in a lot of ways. And for the Flyers to be so on top of their game, so energetic to start that game, as you would expect and hope for being in your own building, for them to not get rewarded for getting the scoring chances in the first period, that really was something that was deflating to this team. Once the first period ended, you're trailing 1-0. Nothing seems to be working to be able to beat Matt Murray, and then everything else kind of just happened after that as a result.
Kevin, how about the Stars not showing up? Giroux getting a lot of heat, too, for how long it's been since he's had a playoff goal. Is that criticism warranted of Giroux, Voracek, those Stars?
It's certainly warranted, and I think one of the more glaring issues that you have with these veteran players isn't the number of points that they're getting. It's the fact that you can look at the penalties that were taken in Game 3 yesterday and be able to point out that every single one of them was a preventable stick infraction that is on a veteran player who should know better. You know, Jake Voracek takes 2 penalties. Giroux takes the slashing penalty that leads to Pittsburgh's first power play goal. There's a lot of pieces there where you can prevent yourself from being an undisciplined team, especially with these veteran players. This isn't Nolan Patrick and Travis Konechny taking these penalties in their first 2 or 3 playoff games. These are veteran players who have been in playoff series before, and those are the guys that you need to step up in a big way. You're seeing Pittsburgh's big names show up constantly. And, you know, in Game 2, that's where the Flyers kind of got the advantage. They were able to neutralize those players, shut them down, and that's how you come out on top. But in Games 1 and 3, you're letting Crosby and Malkin and guys like that just run wild, especially with the amount of power play time you're giving them. So that's really where these other players, you want your big players to be able to take over a game, and at the same time, if they're doing things like putting themselves in the penalty box and making it fairly easy for them to be neutralized in their own way just by not skating as hard as the other team or doing things like that, you don't see Crosby or Malkin taking shifts off. And it certainly looked like guys like Giroux and Voracek weren't playing to their fullest in the latter part of that game yesterday.
Voracek with 2 penalties, both stick infractions, a hook and then a high stick later in the game. Although that hook, both referees, Kevin, the one referee was going to call high sticking. The other referee, Gord Dwyer, I guess overruled him with the hook. It almost looked like they could have called 2 infractions on that play. I want to ask you about Giroux because Mike talked about the turning point of the game for him being the save by Matt Murray on Nolan Patrick early, and that's valid. I also thought that the game really took a turn when they had the 2 goals in 5 seconds. What did you see from your vantage point, specifically for Giroux's role as Crosby blew right by him? I mean, you got to get in front of that guy, and then he picked up the wrong guy. I mean, he made 2 mistakes on one play.
Yeah, completely correct on all accounts there. He can't be that easily beat off at a face-off. You're not going to win every face-off that you take, and Crosby's been in this league too long also to not be successful on certain face-offs. But to be able to make a move like that in that spot, you can't fall asleep on this team at any given moment. And one of the things that I looked at going into this series was the fact that every single regular season game that the Flyers played against the Penguins, there seemed to be that 3-minute, 5-minute span of time during the game where everything falls apart. The wheels come completely off. The Flyers look like they're just lazing their way through that part of the game, and the rest of the game may turn out to look fairly even or be completely adequate to play against Pittsburgh, but that 5-minute span is where you lose the game because Pittsburgh doesn't take a shift off, and which in turn means you can't afford to take a shift off. That was a moment right there where Claude Giroux, as the most veteran player on the team to begin with, but also as the only veteran player who was on the ice for that situation aside from your goaltender, you need to be better in that spot. And there were so many things that really went wrong on that play, but Giroux's are the two errors there are the most glaring. The fact that you let a guy like Crosby go around you without really much of an effort at all, and then didn't recover coming back either. It's how quickly this game can turn. So that's really, those two errors are things that you look at and you go, you throw in the fact that the first power play goal that Pittsburgh scored is off of one of his penalties, and then the goal coming there off of just an overall 5-second span where you're completely caught napping. Those are two things that, as a leader and captain on the team, it's inexcusable.
Talking Flyers, Penguins with Kevin Durso. Yeah, on that Giroux play, I likened it to Mike Gill. I said it's like checking your blind spot. And he looked over the right shoulder and saw the very trailing Pittsburgh player, but never looked over the left to see Dumoulin getting set up in perfect position. So, Kevin, when Travis Sanheim scores at even strength to get it to 4-1, I didn't feel like there was electricity that came back to the building. Yeah, it got loud for a little bit, but then I also thought a turning point was the fact that they had that power play at the end of the second period and weren't able to put one home, basically to end the second period, and couldn't get one home. What are the Penguins doing that are shutting the Flyers down on a power play like that?
I don't know that it's anything that the Penguins are necessarily doing, because the Flyers had everything working for them on the power play in Game 2. It felt like they get 2 power play goals. They're able to set up. They're able to get good puck control. They're able to connect on their passes and get the puck to the net and get traffic in front of Matt Murray, which is really the name of the game on the power play when you're going against Pittsburgh here. You got to get traffic to the net. And I think we saw that on the Flyers' first power play of the game, or second one, which was right at the end of the first period. You saw them doing a lot of the right things there and continuing to apply the pressure. This is after Crosby's already scored the first goal of the game, and you're in a spot where you can possibly tie this game up in the last 90 seconds of the first period, and you maintain control and possession in the offensive zone for the entire span, but don't find a way to score. The power play at the end of the second period, where you could also, again, maybe carve out a little bit of momentum, cut the lead to 2, maybe find a way to start clawing your way back into the game. It just looked like it was back to the old system that wasn't working at different times throughout the year, whether it was on the 10-game losing streak or during some of the struggles in March, where it's just an overabundance of passing around the perimeter and not trying to get the puck on net and into those dirty areas where something may be able to happen. You had the Flyers score 2 power play goals in Game 2, and both of them were the result of players being in front of the net, basically overwhelming the Penguins' defense and penalty kill in that area right in front of the crease. And that's how guys like Nolan Patrick are left open to be able to get in the way of Matt Murray. And you get a guy like Shane Gostisbehere who's throwing a shot through traffic like that. That's what they need to do. And it looked like they just completely abandoned the game plan at a certain point during the second period, where everything wasn't working. It was essentially game over. And even that first goal by Sanheim to get them on the board, it creates a slight buzz, but it wasn't going to do anything. A second goal there would have been absolutely huge for the building. And they looked like they were kind of disinterested in trying to find a way to get the puck on net there. You have to. And that's been kind of one of the Achilles heels of the Flyers power play through the entire season. They pass around and they look for that perfect play a little bit too much. And if they would just kind of adopt what the Penguins had talked about after Game 2, just throw the puck on net and see what happens. You might get a lucky bounce. It might go your way. And they really weren't trying to do that.
So, Kevin, after Game 1, fans, the media, everybody was asking for some sort of lineup changes or make some for Dave Haxtell to make some adjustments, and he didn't do a thing. And they came out and won Game 2. They lose Game 3. Will there be adjustments in your mind before Game 4?
I think you have to start to consider that. I don't know that Dave Haxtell is going to do that, just because he's been, for lack of a better term, he's been relatively stubborn with his lineups for the last, beyond the 3 games of the series, more like the last week and a half, 2 weeks, quite honestly. So as you look towards Game 4, personally, the Flyers looked like they were playing their best when they were at their most physical. You saw in the first period of that game yesterday, they're going out there, they're hitting everything that moves, they're creating opportunities as a result of being physical. It's really a great opportunity. If Robert Haig is as good as he can possibly be here, to throw him back into the lineup to bring some physical edge. At the same time, maybe you throw a guy like Jordan Wheel back into the lineup to try to add some of the speed element up front, because it's lacking a little bit at certain times during the game, and you certainly could use it. Wheels also kind of had Pittsburgh's number throughout the year, and this would be a great time to get him into a lineup. It's tough to say who you really bring out of the lineup at this point, because they don't tend to pull those veteran players out too much. You see a guy like Scott Lawton getting sat for a game, or they'll usually resort to a younger player. And in this case, I don't know that you're going to see a guy like Valtteri Filppula get a game off, or Jori Lehtera get a game off. And I don't think that your fourth line has really been the biggest problem in the series. It's more or less been the top three lines and the veterans on those top three lines that have been making the bigger errors in these games. So I would say that the forwards probably stay the same. I'd like to see them try to get Jordan Wheel back in the lineup, but I'd expect them to stay the same, just because you really can't find a spot where Dave Haxtell can easily make a move and just plug somebody in on the fourth line. The bigger concern to me is that Oscar Lindblom started to play minutes on the fourth line in Game 3, and I don't know that that's helping his mentality here or anything like that. He's not the reason that the second line hasn't been able to get on the board or isn't driving offense as much. It's more or less combating speed and trying to maintain that mentality, the attack mentality, in all 60 minutes of the game. It's difficult to do against Pittsburgh, but I don't think that any of these younger players have been the problem, and nobody should be penalized in the coach's eyes for that.
Kevin Durso, of course, you can check out more on the Flyers and Penguins series from Kevin at 97.3 ESPN.com. Kevin_Durso, Flyers, Penguins Wednesday night, right here on 97.3 ESPN. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, guys.